what are the key trends for Bitcoin that you're seeing?
Yes, thank you for having me. One of the key trends that we're looking for in relation to sentiment is surprisingly traditional market data. It's both that and, of course, all of the news cycles that have been happening very recently around the cryptocurrency market. But it's really the Fed, it's inflation, it's unemployment, and then it's contagion in the crypto market. And those are really kind of the four big buckets of what's pushing us around. Now, if you're looking at the sentiment chart right now, you may say this looks a little bullish, but it's actually bullish to neutral after a very large dip in sentiment pushing us bearish last week when we hit 17.5. So when we see a neutral continuation after bearishness, especially when the Fed is still looking like quantitative tightening is the move and we have all of this contagion floating around us, we typically see price action end up floating back towards its recent lows when we have neutral sentiment coming off of extreme bearish sentiment. And it does seem, based on where we're at today, now that we're starting to dip back into that bearish territory, that the July 4th weekend and moving into July may spell more bearishness based on the overhang that we're currently facing.
Wow. And so when you're saying that folks are looking at other crypto companies, I mean, I mentioned Celsius, BlockFi, Genesis, Grayscale, there seems to be extreme fear out there.
Yes, the fear is certainly rooted in the contagion, word. I think that's kind of the word of the month, maybe word of the year that we'll be looking back and kind of discussing in perpetuity. The big issue with markets is markets prefer certainty. Certainty typically means that we move higher, and we're uncertain as to how bad things are in relation to the Three Arrows Capital scandal, which has clearly impacted BlockFi, Voyager, Celsius, Genesis, and other names that we don't know and that are rumored to be coming out soon. So the market is uncertain on what is coming next and why. And because of that, and coupled with clearly the Fed and the European Central Bank's actions, leads to bearishness and fear around future price action. If you don't know what the Fed is going to do and you don't know how bad things are on the balance sheet for private companies in the crypto sector that really run a lot of core infrastructure, you're more than likely going to ease your foot off of the brake and move to a safe haven, which in this case would be cash, which has been growing stronger throughout this cycle.
Interesting. So there is extreme fear out there. In the sentiment trackers, is there any indication of what folks think is the bottom for Bitcoin?
Yeah, so this is a fantastic question and one we're getting often. Interestingly enough, long-term sentiment has continued to drop throughout this cycle. And I say this cycle meaning kind of post beginning of 2022. What you're looking at right now is daily, but when we look at a month-to-month perspective, we are at very bearish levels, about 30 to 40 for Bitcoin and Ethereum and a few other large cap assets. So one thing that we would definitely look for is that to start forming a round bottom. But I think the sentiment, impact how traders feel and their outlook moving forward is very much going to pertain both to the Fed's actions in relation to quantitative tightening, as well as contagion. If the contagion story ends up, kind of coming to a backstop and we understand exactly the full story, that's very good. I think that would be one sign. And then the other one would be the top of the Fed's quantitative tightening cycle. If you think about basically a hill, we start at 0%, we move up to 0.25%, 0.75%, 0.5%, et cetera. Eventually that's going to reach a top and our recession will reach a bottom. At that point, we will begin to look to get back in the markets. And of course, that's going to depend very much on Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve's outlook on the market. So once we feel that that is kind of reaching a top, we will begin to assess, sentiment from a long-term perspective in terms of a good buy zone. And I think the rest of the market is really looking at similar data as well.